All right, Canada. This here, I'm going to read you. This is actually a story in the Globe and Mail contributed by Carolyn Drebin. July 28, 2015. And I'm going to read this in its entirety. I'm sure many of you will catch on to the similarities to a lot of the things that I talk about and discuss. You'll see. Let me just start here and then go back and reflect on what was said and see how many other aspects of our entire existence are completely correlated with this exact mentality. This will be a huge eye-opener. Even though the initial premise of this story is based on the tooth fairy, the similarities to not just religion but government and central planning, mysticism, forced subjugation, you'll find out that it's all completely aligned in why we live in the world we live today. And it is your parents. It's all the people that, the village, right? The collectivists that forced you to think in this way because that's all you knew. That's what you were raised to know. The detriment, the ramification, and the consequences for all of that are omnipresent and all around us. Headline: Telling my son the truth about the tooth fairy crushed his innocence. By Carolyn Drebin. I remember when my 9-year-old son asked to have the conversation. He knew about how babies were made, and he wasn't sure he believed in God, but he had other pressing concerns about the tooth fairy. He still believed. Despite many queries and doubts, my children were staunch believers in the magic of the tooth fairy. My man and I swore blindly. My man and I. It's amazing how much you can discern and pick out, even just how people write. My man and I swore blindly, fingers carefully crossed, that neither of us were the tooth fairy. We hadn't seen her in action. We didn't know her personally, and other kids in other houses get cash, books, prizes, and even jewelry. The tooth fairy that descended upon our home always left a toonie and always left a note. It was the note that sealed the deal. Written in spidery ink and sealed in a tiny envelope, it was the proof my kids needed that the tooth fairy was the real deal. No parent could possibly print like that, my boy reasoned, not even his own. And so it went, until grade 4. My son told me that the other kids in his class were non-believers. He turned to me desperate for guidance. He admitted he was no longer certain of the validity of the strange mythical creature that collected children's teeth. He had seen movies, he had read stories, and he was suspicious. And yet the notes. Who else but the tooth fairy herself could possibly have written those notes? He saw the grin creeping across my face and busted me. Why was I smiling? I countered, why was he? And then another tact. Why was I trying not to smile? Again, right back at you, son. He resorted to threats. He swore that the next time he lost a tooth, he would tell no one. He would place the tooth under his pillow and wait. If the tooth fairy showed up, then she was real. And if not, he would know for sure the jig was up. He looked proud of himself. I said nothing. And then he confessed. He didn't want to challenge anyone. He just wanted the tooth fairy to be real. Even though he had a hunch that she was make-believe, he really, really, really wanted her to be real. Please, he begged, just tell me, are you the tooth fairy? I took a deep breath and stared at him in all his beautiful innocence. How could I blatantly lie to my firstborn child? I always prided myself on my honesty and candor. This was the moment for me to come clean and fess up, the time to play by my own rules and respect the truth. I looked my son squarely in the eyes. I took a deep breath and replied, "No, I am not the tooth fairy," and scurried out of his room. When I told my man what I had done, he was shocked at both my blatant lying and the fact that our son still bought in. He couldn't get over the fact that our boy swore like a trooper, went to sleep over camp, and rapped like a gangster, yet still believed in the tooth fairy. I sought counsel with friends and family, and all agreed. I was crazy not to tell him the truth. The more I thought about it, the more I realized they were probably right. I didn't want some nasty-ass kid making fun of him for his belief. I was the parent who spoke frankly about sex. We didn't twist the truth, nor should our kids shield our kids from the facts of life. The tooth fairy expose had nothing on where babies came from. And so I told him. I admitted that, yes, I was the tooth fairy. The look on his face nearly felled me on the spot. Instead of a jubilant aha or a triumphant fist pump, his entire demeanor changed. He slumped, utterly defeated, muttering something about having had a feeling, but at the moment, once it was out there, I wished I'd kept dumb. At least until a couple more teeth fell out. Then again, at the rate we were going, with nary a wiggle in sight, it may have been months. With the unmasking of the tooth fairy came the end of my son's childhood as he knew it. The age of innocence was over, slaughtered by his mother, the tooth fairy imposter. When his next tooth fell out, my boy put out an award-winning performance for his brothers. He wrapped the tooth in Kleenex and carefully placed under his pillow with a wink in my direction. He told the younger boys about the special note he hoped to receive written in magical ink. They went to sleep hoping for wiggly teeth of their own, dreaming of spidery writing and toonies. As I kissed the eldest good night, I thanked him for not revealing the identity of the tooth fairy to his siblings. "No problem," he replied. "Though now it'll cost you $5, I smiled. It was a small price to pay for keeping the magic alive, for now. Carolyn Drebin lives in Toronto. Do you see? Carolyn Drebin and a large swath of people, I would say the majority of people, that even though their intentions, their underlying intentions, you might see and acknowledge that there may be some good underlying intentions there. But this story reveals for all who reads it and all who looks at it objectively, consciously, morally, and ethically, well, this is the epitome. This is just one small aspect, but this is all that's wrong with society today. Using collectivism, mysticism, and these completely bullshit narratives to raise our children, and then to hope that they will in turn perpetuate those very myths, those very mystical concepts, to propagate the message because we're too scared to be honest. Well, look what it does. Government, replace this and read the entire story. I might actually do that in a subsequent video. And just, instead of using tooth fairy, replace tooth fairy with government. Central planning, central banks, forced subjugation. It would fit completely in there. And the end result would be the same. Telling your children or telling others the truth, it causes a lot of hurt, a lot of pain, a lot of anguish. And it will destroy their innocence. Because really when we're talking about innocence is people's ability to live in a magical, to trick their mind into believing things that, it just like a Stockholm syndrome. You know, if you're a captive, held captive by, a psychopath or a sociopath, and you're their slave, their captive, what your mind will do to trick you into believing that you're free or that you may appreciate the situation you're in, it's a self-preservation, it's a protection mechanism built, instilled, enshrined in our brain, in our capacity to survive and thrive. But it's devastating A person should not have to rely on that. Honesty, being sincere, using principles, logic, reasoning, evidence, consistent, universality. That's what's going to help your child. Not lying to them or not asking them to lie to their younger siblings. Whether it's the belief in the mysticism of God, or even more dangerous, even much more perilous, because actually the belief in God has no real ramifications or consequences to a human being, because God doesn't exist per se, right? But government does. The God of government, the God of central planning, is an actual real. I mean, the concept is fake, but the people who pretend to be your God are real people. They have the ability, the capacity, and the power to cause a lot of pain and anguish. Unlike the Tooth Fairy, unlike Santa Claus, unlike God or the Easter Bunny, governments, where you try to turn human beings into gods, they actually, because they are real human beings, they're just the pretense of gods exists, but they're real human beings. They actually have the power, the capacity to destroy or to oppress their fellow man, woman, or child. So as much as the Tooth Fairy, obviously, I mean, and I'll admit, I fell for this shit as a kid too. Or as an adult, young adult too. I told my kids the same bullshit that my parents told me. I regurgitated and perpetuated the same bullshit myths, and I apologize. I'm sorry for doing that. But those aspects, like the Easter Bunny, Santa, the negative consequences, other than shedding a few tears and having their faith in the Easter Bunny destroyed, that kind of negative consequences pales massively in comparison to the fact that even trying to explain to kids that central planning and government, there's not the ramifications and consequences of that are far more devastating. Whether they believe in it or don't believe in it, the reality that there are central planners, control freaks, and sociopaths that actually do have the mystical power, because of everyone else's belief, to control others. That this is the point where you have to have most people rejecting this bullshit narrative. If you just wake them up one by one, the rest will just, it's a numbers game, and you're going to lose every time. Something has to, that's why to me the most important thing, there's lots of sub aspects, micro aspects, principles, politics, the social aspect, the economic aspect. But to me, the most important thing is the philosophy is explained to people that no one has the legitimate right to use force, coercion, theft, or oppression to dictate and control your life or to plunder your productive capacity and wealth. Nobody. To me, that's the most important thing I can do. Out of everything that I do on a regular basis, the most important thing I can do is explain that and to the best of my ability to people, to wake them out of that paradigm, that belief, that dogmatic belief in the religion of statism. It's the most important thing we can do. Nobody has an answer as to how it's all going to pan out or what the consequences or ramifications for waking humanity up from this indoctrinated belief. But we have to believe it, good, bad, or anywhere in between. The best thing you do is be honest with them. That's why I do what I do every day. It's Canadian Libertarian. I love liberty.